Okay. Now, when I before I wrote the articles that I wrote on race and healing or racial healing, I preached a message in our church about it. And what were your first thoughts on that message?
So I think some of my first thoughts were that I understood why you felt the need to preach it, and there was some pushback on my part to say, because sometimes what my fear is a lot of what we see a lot of white America doing today, and so my first thoughts were somewhat of black people really need to get over this thing, and it was not too long ago that I was watching another video, and they had a quote from Booker T. Washington, and I want to say Booker T. Washington died in 1916 or something like that, and the quote basically said that there are groups of people here in this country that continue to rehearse the racial problems that this country has had, mostly for their own gain, because they profit from keeping this before our eyes instead of just letting it, like I told my wife, that he said that clear back at the beginning of the 1900s, and here we are in 2000.
100 years later.
Yes, and we're still going ahead and bringing up the racial hurts, if you will, that we've had in our country, and almost to a point where it's never going to be let go. And so I think a lot of what I thought at that point was that I understand, and plus, just thinking about the different members and saying, well, I don't believe there's anyone here that's owned slaves or that's really done any great injustice, and so I looked at it more as a problem that the black community really needs to overcome this, to quit being duped by those individuals that do profit from keeping the issue alive and as strong as it is today. And so that was probably my original feeling when you preached the message, was that I was kind of understanding, and it's like, but
I think one of the things you said to me was that it would just feed that even more, that they would, blacks would hear that and say, see, they even admit it themselves.
Right, and that was a lot of what, I think my fear in general is that certain people would latch hold and say, everything we've been saying is true, and they're finally admitting it. It's like, well, no, and like I said, now after the articles, and I understand exactly what you were saying in all of it, and the thought that you had, but yeah, my original feelings were that definitely that definitely groups in Black America would take that and run with it in a way that they ought not.
Well, I don't think that there are that many listening to me anyway, so I don't think there's a big danger of it. But one thing is, do you think, I want to ask this question, do you think that some of your reluctance to embrace that teaching is because you don't want to rehearse your own militancy. And so in other words, and I asked another black friend the same question. Do you find that if you think much about the history of blacks in America, that it does bother you?
I think to some extent that there could be some of that. In that, I would say I definitely don't want to fall back into certain thought patterns, you know, and so there's definitely things that I kind of avoid, and you know, kind of like a movie about Nat Turner came out at some point. I can't remember when, but I definitely didn't try to watch it. You know, it definitely felt like,
Because it rehearses that.
Right.
The reason I'm asking, I think that sometimes when we have something that was really hurtful in our past,
right.
We don't like to think about it. Other people might bring it up and say, man, this really needs to be dealt with. And you're saying, I've gotten over it and I don't want to go back and look at it.
Right. And you know, I think if I could see something that was beneficial in going back and looking at it, then of course I probably would, but I just really can't see the benefit and that's where a lot of where I'm at today, and the way I kind of think, you know, about other black people is that why do you want to continue to, you know, to go back and see whatever, instead of looking and focusing your attention to right now and what you can do right now. And I think that there are things that, you know, as far as race relations go, you know, I tell my wife that, you know, I'm definitely not oblivious to racial situations. And so like I tell her, you know, when I go to work, there's in any of the trades, it seems like there's not very many black people, you know. And so and I know that, you know, like I've asked my wife before, have you ever felt like when you go someplace you are a representative of the white race, you know? And she said, no, I'm just Sharon. I'm just me.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, but I'm very well aware that I am a representative of the black race when I go someplace. And I do know that I have an ability to help or kind of hurt the way this person may perceive, because there's, especially moving to Utah, there's been a number of people that have said, you know, I've never been around black people very much, or I've never met a black person like you. You know, it's like, well, it's like, yeah, well, there's a lot.
Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
You know, it's like, well.
Well, and the funny one is, of course, if they know another black person, they ask you if you know them, because they just figure.
Yeah. Well, even my wife does that. Sometimes, you know that guy? I said, no, I don't know that guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, and that's why I try not to go back very much. I try to really, you know, really push forward in that. You know, I remember I was working a job, and they hired another black guy, and the foreman there I was working with when I got saved, you know, and all these years later, we're sitting down having lunch, and he says, you know, I knew Mel back when he used to, you know, wear do-rags and all, you know. He said, and the guy says, oh, so you knew him when he was black, huh? I said, that's a funny one, buddy.
Yeah.
So,
but that is how people look at it.
Right.
And
Right.
almost like you've denied your own people by not carrying on the culture
Right.
with it. So part of my reason for preaching at number one and then writing the 3 articles I wrote is because I have grown up in a much more racist, racially charged environment in southern Indiana. There are a lot of racists, rabid racists down there in that area. I was around it a lot. I participated in it, like telling jokes and things like that. And definitely it was ingrained in us that, you didn't meet many intelligent black men who were well-spoken. And so that was almost a shock, like you must have been raised in white culture or something. And that is kind of the stereotype there. And so I was looking at it from that viewpoint and saying, okay, I admire the fact that many black men like yourself, and especially black Christians, that want to get over this and be done with it and not carry it on. But I also recognize that our white culture has done a lot to drag this out. We've not taken time just to examine ourselves, examine our assumptions and that sort of thing. And like in a marriage, the couple is fighting, all right, and one couple is going to be the one man, I'm sorry, or the woman, one of the spouses decides that I'm not going to carry this on. I'm going to forgive this. I'm not going to fight against this. But the other one continues to do things, or just doesn't apologize, doesn't try to make things right at all, and just carries on like there should never be a problem. Right. So then you have one who says, I'm going to forgive the problem, and the other says, there never should have been a problem. That marriage is never going to be healthy until there's reconciliation, till there's forgiveness, till there's confession of sin. And so I felt that white people do need to pause to consider what we've contributed to this. And I've asked another friend, and I ask you the same question. Do you think that it's legitimate to say that many black people do carry, they don't have the means of reconciling what was done to their ancestors, and in many cases, I mean, we're not talking that long ago, shortly before you and I were born, that these things were still regularly happening.
And so, reading the articles, and it definitely caused me to have to think, and I try to be aware that that everything that filters through my little bubble here in the world isn't necessarily always very accurate. And so a lot of my situation came from Southern California and here in Utah, which, like I told my wife, people would be very surprised to know that Utah isn't probably the most racist place in America. I'm pretty sure a lot of people would probably think that just because the higher population of white people, but I haven't seen that to be the case.
So you haven't experienced a lot of racism here. Would you say you experience more here or in California?
I would say probably more, especially overt racism in Southern California than I have here in Utah. And so, so when I formulated a lot of the opinions that I had, I really hadn't maybe looked at the rest of the country and individuals that are still in the South and those types of places, or know their ancestors, I guess, that were in the Deep South during those times. And definitely could change your perspective a little bit on the way they see things. And so my grandparents came from there. I think the one grandparent from Alabama and the other from like Mississippi or or something like that, to Southern California. But like my grandparents on my mother's side, I never really knew. And so on my dad's side, there was just my grandmother. And she wasn't a very, I don't remember her talking to me about much of anything at all in my whole life. And I was around her quite often. She just seemed like a very hard woman to some degree. But she really didn't talk a lot about anything. At least not to me, she didn't. And there may have been some people that, but so I never really had that perspective, I guess, of a grandparent that would, caution their children that you need to watch out for white people and so on. And I probably could say that there was some of that, and that probably helped with me going into some of the militant type thinking, because even when I was in the Marine Corps, when I graduated boot camp, I remember one of my drill instructors who was black who told me, when you get out there to the fleet, make sure you stick with the brothers. Don't, the white guys will get you in trouble. It was the exact opposite. I'm pretty sure, because most of the trouble I got into, I'm pretty sure it was with the brothers. So. But there's definitely that kind of thought process that he had, and so after reading your article and thinking that there probably are legitimate individuals in our country that truly believe this way. My sister, we were raised in the same household, and I tell you, I thought it was going to come. I don't know. I didn't think. There was a possibility it could have turned into a fist fight. She was definitely getting quite agitated, and it was probably Thanksgiving during the whole Trayvon Mullen
Trayvon Martin
trial, and so, and I remember watching some of that trial and thinking that, well, he's probably going to get off, because this doesn't seem like it's going the way the people are trying to say it went down. And like I told my wife, I can understand in that situation whether or not he was advised to stay where he was, why that young man got shot. I definitely understand that. And this is what I was trying to convey to my sister. And it got heated, and it got heated fast on her part. And I was sitting there thinking, all I'm saying is, I'm looking at the evidence, and it does not look like they have anything to really convict him on in this situation. And luckily my mother was able to diffuse her. And so now we don't have many conversations like that. And so I know, at least for her, she definitely feels like we still have a great deal of problems. I don't think it's so I don't know what the split is in my mind of the individuals that feel genuine about this and those individuals that are just using the movement to further socialism and things of that nature in our country. And so I think that's where I kind of struggle. But I do now believe that there probably is a significant, at least, group. I don't know if it's the majority, but I do believe there's a significant group out there that feel like they are, they have been harmed greatly and continue to be harmed greatly by white America.
Now, you're in a church that is majority white here.
Right.
We have some other ethnicities, but And you work, obviously you're here in Utah, you're saying that you don't run into a lot of racism, but do you run into some where you can tell people either look down on you, feel superior to you, or feel you're inferior?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And, it's one of those things that, so just at work, and like I've told my wife this before, that we could have some ideas on how to fix something, a situation, a problem. And it's like, and there's times when I can go ahead and say something, and it's almost like I didn't say anything. It's like I was just sitting over there. And like I told my wife, at the end of the day, it really doesn't bother me that much. If you.
But that's because you don't let it bother you.
Right.
You can see where somebody else would be.
Right. And again, like 20 years ago, I probably would be more bothered by it.
Yeah.
Today is kind of like, well, so what good does it do me to
Yes.
throw a tantrum about it?
Yeah, and that's you behaving like a Christian, and that's partly what inspired me to write about it, is that is something people experience. I know it is. And as whites, we tend to dismiss it or say, well, you're reading too much into that. But,
Right.
but when it happens consistently, you know that that's what's happening.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, at the end of the day, it's nothing that it doesn't benefit me to
Right.
to be that bothered by it. So.
But you are forbearing. In that case, you're being forbearing as God would have you to be. But that's where there are a lot, of course, that are unsaved, a lot that don't know Christ, don't know forbearance at all. And that's a big driving force behind the anger and hostility that we see now, is that it's happened for so long and it's just been dismissed or overlooked that eventually folks are going to lash out
Right.
at it.
Right.
So you ran into a young man in a bookstore, I believe you told me about. You
Right.
share that with us?
So, we were in a bookstore, and I was talking with my wife. Maybe I could have been talking more loud because sometimes I get a little riled up, and so than what I thought I was. But we were talking about some of the racial issues in America, and one of the things that I was telling her is that, if you believe that you're being held down by white America, then you will be held down. You're not going to prosper. You're not. So there's no good in you seeing it that way. To look at any of that way. To believe that the man is keeping you down. At that point in time, you're the only person keeping you where you're at. And it was probably about that time I looked in in a adjacent aisle or something, and noticed there was a young black man that was looking at me, and just from because he had a mask on and everything, but you could look in his eyes and tell he was quite upset, and he marched out of the store, and I told my wife that's an individual that has bought, that has essentially drank the Kool-Aid, that he can't amount to anything because of this group that's holding him where he is. And he later came back into the store and asked me, do you really believe what you just said? And at that point in time, I was not really that high on a discussion with him about it. I told him, well, no, I don't believe what I just said. I know what I just said is the truth. And he had originally apologized for eavesdropping on my conversation. I told him, well, if you're sorry about eavesdropping on my conversation, you should probably keep going and keep moving. But as far as my feelings on it was, and I believe now, I've told my wife, because my wife did tell me, and after he left, and it's one of those times when you think to yourself, oh, gave her the opportunity to be right on this one, huh? She says, honey, you could have probably used that as a witness and, or I said, yeah, well, he wasn't going to listen to me. She's like, well, you probably should have just, maybe talked to him. You never know. So, and then, reading your article and then thinking back on it, I felt like, I probably should have tried to explain to him, here's how I've come to this point in my life and why I'm not willing to just go ahead and have this belief that, the man out there is trying to get me. But yeah, I definitely that day felt more like a lot of what we're hearing today is a political agenda that's been hijacked by some very wicked people that definitely do not have black people or any other people's best interest at heart outside of their own, and ensuring them power here in our country. And so that was basically part of the reason that I probably didn't speak to him. But if I had it to do all over again, I really would have liked to sit down with him and just
Yeah. So, and I agree with you. There is an agenda behind much of what we see happening. I don't see that as a reason for us not to examine ourselves and do what we can to prevent. Really, if we do what's right, we take the issue away from them. Right. They can't exploit it if we're not giving them something to exploit. So if we, as white people, white Christians especially, will pay attention to what's happening around us and to the attitudes that we carry commonly, I think that can make a difference. If you could just feel like you could be totally honest with white people and not worry about being forbearing or anything else and just say, these are some things you need to work on, what would they be?
I would guess the biggest thing is just to understand that I guess that black people are individuals just like white people are individuals, And there's a lot of things that I push back with the idea of like black culture. Now that I'm where I am today and going through life, like I told my wife, I don't understand what black culture is. It's kind of like a presumptive idea that all white people are the same, and white culture is, this. Like, black culture is just, and to just understand that, hey, I'm just Melvin. That's it. I just happen to be black. But whatever things that I do that a person may look at and say, that's not that great. Well, that's Melvin. That's not black people. That's, and whatever things that, that are good, that's just Melvin. That's not all black people. We're all individuals, and not to go ahead and presume in any way that, I remember a coworker back during when Trump was running for president, and he was we were sitting down at lunch, and he was going over all this stuff about Bernie Sanders, how great Bernie was, and this, that, and the other thing, and I said, yeah, is that so? And so I started talking to him about some things and whatnot, and when we were done, I said, when you sat down and started talking, you were probably certain I was a Democrat, weren't you? He said, I was. I said, yeah. I said, yeah, it's kind of racist, to just assume that, that's my political makeup just because of, the color of my skin. When, I don't know that people in any other racial group anyone looks at and just says,
Yeah.
that's what they have to be.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be the biggest thing, is just to understand that, you know, there wasn't a cookie cutter that just, you know, slid us all out. And so that would probably just be the biggest thing. And at the same time, I think that, you know, I would say, as far as for black people in general, to say, you know, we have to give white people and other people space to make mistakes, because right now we're at a point where, I mean, you can almost not say anything without someone being able to say, so here's where the racism was.
Yeah.
And it's like, how does that make anything better?
Yeah.
It won't, you know. And so, but yeah, that's probably what I would say, is just realize that, yeah, we're not all the same.
Do you think that it would be helpful for white people to try to understand more where some black people are coming from in their grievances?
And I think so. I think it was, you know, helpful for me to just looking at things in America today, to say, well, okay, there are those out there that are probably feeling like this is real, and there are real hurts and whatnot. And like, I've even talking with my wife, you know, I can see how a person can look at their own personal life and may have really run into a real serious racial situation, and then seeing the way the media, you know, because if you look at the media, you'd have to believe that, you know, we're still back in the 50s or something like that nothing has changed, and how that could affect them. I think that it would probably be beneficial just to, I guess, just the acknowledging that there are some people that are truly hurt, and that they are probably hypersensitive to issues of race.
Yeah.
Because, you know, at this point in time, I don't know that there's anything a white person can do to a black person in America that it won't be, well, because he's a racist. That's the only motivation he would have had to do that. You know, not the fact that, you know, the guy just really made him mad. That's why he did it. You know? So, and so, yeah, that definitely would be a good thing. I guess at the same time, is to keep some of it into perspective.